All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Dr. Tara Tuesdays. I am your host, Dr. Tara, and as always, I want to welcome you into this safe space. Today, we are going to be concluding. Good evening. Make sure you drop a line. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dr. Tara Tuesdays. This evening is the end of our COVID-19 conversation, our COVID-19 series, where we will be discussing how to have conversations not only with ourselves, but also with our family members. As always, your comments are welcome and needed and much appreciated. So as we go through this evening's conversation, please feel free to drop what you're doing, what support you need, because we want to create a community of resources for ourselves and each other, especially during a time like this where we can't necessarily be with each other physically, but we can still give that emotional support. So as always, I want to jump right into the conversation. So when we think about COVID-19, one of the things that is at the forefront of my mind is how we are inundated with updates daily, right? We're continuing to get updates around businesses, around the economy, around schools, around all these different things. And one of the things that it requires us to do is how do we translate this information into actual conversations or talking points that we're having, one with ourselves, and that we're having with people that we care about. It seems that either people are over talking about what's going on in COVID-19 or not talking about it at all. And most of us either find ourselves either on one of those two extremes. But what we want to try to get to today or this evening is how do we find ourselves somewhere in the middle where we have a nice, healthy balance of it. And so because we want to frame conversations both for ourselves, our children, spouses, partners, friends, whoever, where we're not avoiding the seriousness of it, but we also don't want to get consumed by it. And, just how society works with information, we have things that we call clickbaits. The more enticing a title or a caption, the more likely people are to click on it, to tune in. And so understanding that, how do we stop ourselves from being overloaded with information overload, and how then do we take this information and hold it for ourselves, but then also help those that we care about process this information for themselves. So the first thing I want to talk about is when we think about having these types of conversation is, one, just allowing ourselves the space to process, right? So before we share information, we always want to allow ourselves to process. And so I know that I have been guilty of this too. I may not even read an article, but the headline is so good. It's attacking all of my anxiety points, and I'm just sending it on. Like, did you see this? Did you see this? And so before we send out information, before we're having conversations with those people that we care about, we want to allow ourselves to process. So many of us, when we were first told about quarantining, when we were first told about coming inside or school closings, we went right into, my head is to the ground. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going into almost like this hyper awareness or this hyper workload. I see someone gave me a heart, so that this is something that you can agree with. And so, one, I want to just break that down and create an understanding that is survival, right? That is a skill that keeps us alive. So it has a very valid purpose. However, at the same time, it creates situations where we're running on fumes. And I know for myself, that is something that it's like a sprint where, because there's so much uncertainty around what's going on, so many of us are in this sprint mode when we really need to be practicing for a marathon or a long distance run. We don't know how long things are going to be like this. And what happens is that when we're running on these fumes, I'm waking up with this huge adrenaline rush, which again is this biological response. We want to allow ourselves the space to process, one, our thoughts and feelings, and then move accordingly. So if any of you tuned in last week, one of the things that we talked about that is so important is our own self-awareness, our own self-check, understanding that emotions lead to thoughts, and those thoughts then lead to behaviors. And so allowing myself the space and opportunity to process first before I share out. Because one of the things that I want us to be mindful of is that our fear can easily transfer to someone else, even if that's not our intention. So one of the things that I always ask people, or one of the things that I often bring up when I'm doing trainings or workshops is think about the people in your life and think about if you were having a wonderful day, if you just got the best news ever, who would you contact? Is there someone in your life that you would definitely contact? Is there someone in your life that you would definitely share this news with? They would hold it for you. They would be just as excited or sometimes even more excited than you are. Great. Hold that person in your mind. Now I want you to think about your life. If you had the worst day, right? Everything, it was raining, it was this, it was that. And think about, is there someone in your life that you would definitely not share this information with? And so, Tamika, I see you said your mom for your good news. That's great. And so someone that you would definitely not share this information with, because why? Because I start off talking about my bad day, and then we end up talking about your bad year, right? That there's this push-pull in who's having the worst day. The same thing works with anxiety. The same thing works with information. So when we talk about processing information first, we want to make sure that I'm not processing this out of a space of fear, because we want to be clear on what our intentions are, especially for those that we love, because we love people. A lot of times that fear kind of overpowers our intention. And so asking ourselves, taking a moment to check in with ourselves and asking ourselves, why am I sharing this information? Am I sharing this information because I'm scared? I want you to be scared with me, or I'm angry and I want you to be angry with me? Asking ourselves, what is my desired outcome? What is my desired outcome? When I'm talking to my children, what is my desired outcome? And when I talk about outcome, I'm talking about, again, I'm starting from that emotional space again. Emotions lead to thoughts, lead to behaviors. And so how do I want to feel after we end this conversation? How do I want my loved ones to feel after we end this conversation? And then where do I want that to take them? How do I want to guide their thought process around this, right? So we know that with school closings, one of the things that we have to allow ourselves, and if any of our children have been impacted by, missing graduations or proms or whatever else, allowing people to properly grieve that, because it is a loss, but also being mindful that my grief or my anxiety isn't being transferred to them, because if so, it's going to be hard for me to hold my emotions and kind of provide the space for them. But then also, especially if I'm doing this as a parent, a lot of times our children are programmed to, and this is just the way the brain works for the developing brain. The brain is designed to make a connection. And so for a lot of times for children, their automatic response goes to, okay, well, if mom or dad is anxious or upset, then I'm going to put on a stronger front to make sure that they're okay. Because the thought process is that if they're okay, then they can make sure that I'm okay. And we want to make sure that as much as possible, we want to be mindful to not do that, because we want to give those that we care about, whether they're children, whether they're parents, coworkers, friends, whoever, we want to give them their own space to process. And so when we talk about the loss process, the grief and loss, we want to go through the stages. The first stage is denial. You know what? It's not a big deal. I wasn't thinking about it. School is canceled. This is great. This is just like summer vacation. I'm going to keep it moving. And we quickly learn that it doesn't work like that. One of the things that I was sharing last week was that when schools were closed, when we initially got the notification that schools would be closed just for a period of 2 weeks, my children were on cloud 9, right? And then 3 days later, my daughter came in and said, you know what? I'm ready to go back to school. I'm done with this. I'm ready to get back to my routine. And I joke about it now, but I was trying to sing the class song. I couldn't get the class song correct. I kept messing up the words. She was getting frustrated. I was sad, and so it took a while for us to step back, or it took me saying, you know what, we can step back and let's process what's going on. What I see you experiencing is this, right? I understand that you're sad. And so part of having these conversations or crafting these conversations is being able to own not only what we feel, but also being able to own the feelings of those that we're talking to. And so if I'm talking to someone and they're scared, and even with the best of intentions, their fear is translating or transferring to me, I can own that, right? I can say, I see that this is scary. Yes, this is scary times. And then move the conversation there, because a lot of times what we see is that fear or that anxiety or that anger or that frustration comes out in a way that leads to controlling behaviors. And so again, if it starts with fear, then the thought is, in order for everyone to be safe, I have to be able to dictate everyone's move, or I have to be able to make sure that everyone does these things or listens to me or sits here or does this. And that leads to control, and that can make people actually feel more confined. Or the fear is, I'm scared that this is going to happen. And so I don't want to make them scared. So I'm going to avoid this entire conversation. And so what happens on either regard, on either end, those are what we call opposite sides of the same coin. People are left to process information such as this by themselves. And because what we're experiencing now as a global society is something that is impacting us on so many different levels, from personal to financial to familial to education to employment wise, we all need help in processing each piece. One of the things that I started to do just for myself, hey, Sharon, thanks for checking in. One of the things that I started to do just for myself is, as I'm planning out my day or as I'm trying to plan out my week, I've had to compartmentalize all those different pieces that are now being pushed together, right? So for myself, I do a parenting goal. What is my parenting goal for this week, right? My one of the goals is, I joke about this. I want to make sure everybody takes a bath and eats every day. And I say that very, very jokingly, but also very, very seriously, because it's so easy to get caught up in everything that, that I'm going or that we're experiencing. And then as a business owner, what is it that I want to make sure I get accomplished this day? As a daughter, as a friend, what is it that I want to make sure, who do I want to make sure that I connect to? And what types of conversations do I want to make sure that I'm having that add to my well-being, that add to my mental and emotional stability? What kind of conversations do I want to engage in? And so breaking that down, if I'm a parent and I have children of different ages, understanding that they're going to have very different emotional or developmental responses. So my son is a teenager. He's not going to get on a Zoom meeting, right, to check in with his friends and families. He's not going to have, hey, everyone, come on. But what will he do? I saw a meme on social media, and it gave me a feeling of peace, because it let me realize I'm not the only one. It said, when you are woken up at 3 a.m. by your teenager screaming on PS4 playing a game, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is someone else who's experiencing this same thing. But who is he? He's talking to his cousins. He's talking to his friends. He's connecting with them because he can't be with them. And so allowing that also to occur. Understanding too that younger children may have different emotional responses. So like I was sharing with you all last week, my daughter is 7. And for her, she doesn't necessarily have the words or the cognition. She'll ask questions, but some of her questions make her scared. And so part of our process, part of our conversation process is, which details do I allow to come into the conversation, and which details do I need to filter out in order to protect her emotional well-being and her sense of security within our household. And then also being mindful of how she may behave and understanding the cues. So wherever we are, whoever we are, whether you are a parent, whatever role you have, you are not only the expert of your life, but you're also the expert of the people whose lives you are in, right? So I know how my children respond. I know their behaviors. I'm the expert of them. I know my mom. I know when we're talking, what kind of mood she's in. I'm the expert. We have a relationship. And so understanding that based on this relationship, I have to be more aware of how they're responding to kind of feed into or acknowledge the emotions that they may be carrying inside that they may not express. And also being mindful of my own emotions, so that when I'm not at the place to handle theirs, I can allow myself to take a step back. When we talk about breaking down these conversations, one of the things that I'm a huge fan of is what we call I feel conversations. And so I feel conversations are very, very simple. And it allows us to own our emotion because of a situation. And so one of the things that is so important is that we all understand that we are all experiencing a condition that is out of all of our control. And that in of itself, again, as I've said, every week since we've been talking about this, that is very normal to have a normal reaction to an abnormal event. And so understanding this, how do I want to frame conversations? I want to own how it is that I'm feeling, and then I want to provide detail. Then I want to provide the factual data. So I feel nervous when I watch the news. I feel nervous when I see this happening and right? I want to provide very factual data that doesn't allow for a lot of debate. Because when it does, it's easy to become sidetracked. It's easy to become defensive. It's easy to become, again, caught up in the emotional environment versus I'm able to have a balance between where my emotions are, but then also have some type of cognitive or higher level process that allows me to be able to rationalize and then plan effectively. Because when we do that, we're understanding that we're giving both ourselves and then people that we care about the space and the platform to process in different ways. And it allows us to see the different nuances. So for those of us who are verbal, I like to talk about this. I want to talk it out. I want to do this. We may be in a household where someone communicates non-verbally and we are driving each other crazy because we're not seeing eye to eye or we're taking it personal. And so it's bringing some contention. And Christina, I see what you're saying too. It says, this is so true because when I ignore one emotion, it shows up as another. Definitely, it's going to come out. And so my thing is, let's get in front of it. Let's be proactive about it instead of being reactive about it. Once we understand how anxiety works, that gives us back some of our control. Anxiety, again, and I'm so glad you brought it. I'm gonna put your comment back up. One of the things that anxiety does is that it causes us to believe that we have to react to situations. And when we understand that, we then can understand that if I can get in front of this situation, then I can better control and decide on how I want to have these conversations. And so understand. So Sam, thank you for tuning in. And so when we see this, understanding, okay, what is the emotion that I want to experience? What is the outcome? I'm big on that, especially when we have difficult conversations. And so for me, understanding what a difficult conversation is, when there's going to be different emotions that are brought into this space, when I have to hold not only my emotion, but I have to hold everyone else's emotion, when there are different types of processes, so verbal, nonverbal, cerebral, some people become very logical and that may be hard for me to deal with, or that may be easy for me to deal with. And some people become very emotional, right? So we have verbal, nonverbal, cerebral, and emotional. And so understanding that all of those processing types are valid. And when I am engaging in a conversation with someone around this, then I have to be able to hold where it is that I'm standing, holding my own process in this, but then also be able to allow their processing without defensiveness or without rebuttal. And so when we're talking about having these types of conversations, I'm owning my feelings. I am huge on I feel statements. I feel this when this happens. So it's I feel, and then you insert the emotion when whatever the situation is happening, right? I'm owning that. And when I'm owning it, what I'm not doing is becoming defensive about it. And so when we have these types of conversations, so I'll give an example. So we all may have someone in our lives that is up to date on every news briefing, is up to date on every news article, is up to date on every social media post, and they want to share it with you. And again, it's because I have the best intentions and I want to share this and I want to make sure that you're safe. However, it is very anxiety provoking to you as the individual, as the receiving, on the receiving end. And I want to own, I feel anxious when you send me 5 articles a day. I feel anxious when every conversation we're having, it's about this, right? I need to take a break, right? For my own emotional stability and allowing myself to not get in a debate. And so, Kelly, I want to go to your comments as I needed this. I'm trying to control a situation because of my anxiety and the family is not responding in the way that I want. I absolutely need to relax. And so how do we do that, right? So it's so funny when I want to stay with your comment for a second. When I'm anxious and I try to control my anxiety, right? It's almost like it's a dance that I do with myself and it does not work because what is it that I'm doing? Let me not think about the thing that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about it again. Let me not think about that. You know what? Let me not think about the thing that I think about. So let me think about this, which is connected in some way to the thing I'm thinking about. So let me not think about this. So if I'm there, right? If I'm there, and that's how anxiety works, right? You thought you were going to think about the sofa. And now all of a sudden, or you thought you were going to think about this room, or you thought you were going to think about dinner, and dinner reminds you of going to the grocery store, and the grocery store reminds you of this. That's how anxiety works. It goes into those what if thoughts and those what if cycles. When I find myself in that space, the best thing for me to do is to just pause and acknowledge it. Because when it comes out as control, and I'm going to put Kelly's comment back on the screen, when it comes out as control, what it means is that I've gone straight from emotion to behavior, and I have not stopped to put a thought process in the middle. And that's okay, but I want to allow myself the space to come back into the present moment. Because control is future tense, right? I have to control everything that you're doing right now, but then I also have to control everything that you're going to do in 5 minutes. I have to control everything that you're going to do for the rest of the week. And that's not the case. I want to be able to be in the present moment and be okay with where we are. And so when I find myself in a situation where I want to control things, I can stop and I can own that, right? I'm feeling anxious and I feel like, and this anxiety is making me believe this, right? The anxiety is making me create this story, or the anxiety is making me think of your behavior in this way. And so when I do that, I'm allowing a break to occur in my anxious thoughts, which means that for that moment, however short or however long it lasts, for that moment, I can get in front of it. And so if I'm saying this, then I can say, I can get in front of this, I can understand it, I can choose to think something differently. Or I can say, if I'm not there yet, I can say, and especially as it relates to controlling behaviors, I can go in it and say, their behavior is not necessarily a sign that they don't agree with me. And what anxiety creates for us is that everyone has to be in agreement with me in order for us all to be safe. And that's not true, right? You can have your thought, I can have my thought, and we can still work together. And so when I get into this space that Kelly's talking about, what I want to do is go more general. Because what has happened, if you all can imagine a funnel, sometimes with the anxiety, it allows us to start with this general thought, right? I want my family to be safe. That's up here in this general thought. And then it's funneled down. And so in order for safety to occur, we have to get up every morning at 7 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, we have to eat breakfast. By 10 o'clock, we have to have our family meeting. By 10:30, everyone has to be on their computers. Like that's too specific. And so what I want to do is go more general. And so if I'm caught in power struggles, if I'm caught in feelings of contention or stress or anxiety or anger, which anxiety with the lens of control often turns into anger, then I want to go more general. I want everyone in my family to be safe. And guess what? Everyone in my household wants us to be safe too. And so what tends to usually happen is that brings my anxiety level down, just even if it's just a little bit. What is it that I can think about? And that's what we call like the path of least resistance. And so what is it that I can think about? What is it that we can talk about that keeps me at the most calm place possible given the situation? So we know that, again, we're talking about this pandemic. We know that it's going to cause anxiety in some way. And so I want to give it that, right? It makes me anxious thinking about it. I want to own that. And so what is it that I can control? What is it that I can find that I can agree on when I'm having conversations with people that I love that allows us all to be on the same page? Christina, what you said is, I've noticed I want my house so organized because it's the one thing that I can control. Yes, I am the same way. However, me and my children have different definitions of cleanliness. And so for me, it boils down to what are the areas that we can all agree upon? What are the areas that we can all agree upon that are allowed to be the way that I need them to be? And how can I give some leeway so that I'm not in here cleaning up behind everyone or screaming at everyone or not using my meditation voice when people leave, paper towels on the sink or leave dishes out on the counter. So looking at those things and understanding when I think about what it is that I want to control and owning that too. So if I've noticed, and I want to thank you for your transparency, if I've noticed that I want my house so organized because it's the one thing that I can control, when I notice that the house isn't as organized as I want it to be, I want to acknowledge that I'm not upset about that. I'm anxious about something else. And so this is how it's manifesting. And so when I see that, or when I'm able to acknowledge that, then it usually will allow me to have a different behavioral response versus if I took the house being disorganized as a personal attack on me. And so yes, that's so true. So understanding that too, so we can try to control part of our responses. So getting into those I feel statements. I feel this when. this is happening, because it allows us to, again, take a step back and then engage in a conversation with people that we care about in a way that includes them, but doesn't make them responsible for controlling our anxiety, because again, that's our responsibility. And so so Kelly, going to your comment, the number one concern you have, realizing it's your anxiety and forcing it on them. When I realize that, then it allows me to take some of the pressure both off of them, but more so, it also allows me to take the pressure off of myself, because then I don't have to be overly concerned and cautious about every move. Now, I do want to be mindful, and I do want to be practical, and I do want to be safe. But where's that middle ground that allows for some autonomy and allows for some conversation that is welcome into this? Because what I want to do is if everyone is experiencing this, and this is the interesting thing about pandemics or anything that happens in a large amount, everyone is experiencing the same thing. Everyone is experiencing the same thing. And if I'm operating through the lens of control, what I am saying, either consciously or subconsciously, is that I'm the only one that's allowed to have this experience. And that's not really what you mean. That's not what you mean. You acknowledge that everyone is experiencing the same thing. And so how then do I give the space for everyone to have their individual processes? If I'm able to acknowledge that everyone is experiencing the same thing, if I'm able to acknowledge everyone is entitled to their own emotional response, and I don't have to control it or try to shift it in a way that stops their emotional response and allows my emotional response to be the only one that is open for consideration. And so when we do this, then what we're working to do is to create a space, whether we are alone or with other people, that allows for two things. One, flexibility, but then also a plan, right? A plan with flexibility. Because what we want to plan for is the management of our anxiety. So when we are in a situation like this, again, where we're being inundated with updates every day, like every 12 hours, every 24 hours, one of the things that we want to allow ourselves for is flexibility, because what it means is that I'm giving myself the space to experience all of the emotions. I literally have, and I'm going to be, I have literally experienced all the emotions I think there are to experience that a person can, from gratitude to like what is going on, to denial, to frustration, to irritability, to joy, to happiness, and probably all in one day. And so understanding that because of that, there may be times where I need to have a timeout moment. I need to take a break from myself before I engage in this conversation, or as I'm engaging in this conversation. What is it that I want to allow myself to feel? Again, what emotion do I want to allow myself to lead that conversation? And so when we understand the emotional range or the emotional depth that comes with dealing with issues such as COVID-19 or chaos or any type of sudden change or sudden transition, what I'm acknowledging, or that flexibility piece, is acknowledgement of the loss that occurs with that. And so when we talk about grief and loss, we're going to talk about denial, we're going to talk about anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Those are the 5 stages of grief and loss. First is denial. Again, I'm in denial that any loss has happened. I can still go here, I can still go here, I can still go here, which is why we're seeing all these stay-at-home infomercials and pleas, because people are in denial, right? I don't want to acknowledge that my daily routine has to be disrupted. I'm in denial about this. I'm in denial that I can't be around the people that I love, or I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm in denial about that. That is a natural response to loss. And so, yes, while we're upset and while we're frustrated, we also that's a natural response. Next is anger. And so when we think about anger, I'm angry at who? I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at others. I'm angry at the universe. I'm angry at the situation. I'm angry at, if I believe in a higher power, I'm angry at my higher power or God. I'm just angry, right? I'm angry about this. I'm angry for this loss. I'm angry that it's doing this. And I'm expressing that anger either internally or externally. So one of the things that I have to touch on is how sometimes with that anger, we develop unhealthy coping skills. And so for some people, when we think about understanding how this anger manifests itself. Some of us, I'm drinking every day. Some of us, I am fussing at someone that I love the most every day. Some of us, I am on social media from sun up to sundown just to just to avoid it all. And so understanding how this anger manifests either internally or externally, some of us, it makes us want to withdraw. Some of us, we lash out. Understanding that anger is a normal response, but we want to be able to control it. And so anger is a movement emotion, meaning that anger makes you want to do something, right? Again, either internally or externally. And so part of our work through understanding anger is that I can use this, I can channel this anger into something that helps me process. And so because I don't want to allow the anger to stay there. And when I'm doing behaviors, what I am oftentimes unconsciously trying to do is trying to suppress it. And sometimes it's okay to say that I'm angry, right? A lot of us have been taught to be fearful of anger, think that anger is a bad emotion, and it's really not. And so understanding that anger plays a part in this, I just want to know how I can channel it in a way that allows me to move in a way that's effectively. And so when we understand that, so we have depression, we have anger, then we have bargaining. So bargaining are those if-then thoughts, right? So if this wouldn't have happened, then we wouldn't have been able to do this. Or if this would have happened, then I wouldn't have been able to do this. If I had saved more money, then we wouldn't have been able to do this. The thing about this is that you can never effectively plan for loss, right? You can never effectively plan. No one could have planned for this, the impact that it's having. And so when we get into that if-then thinking, one of the things that it does is that it allows us to place blame. And so when we are able to place blame, one of the things that happens is that I don't have to change because I don't have to make any movements or any corrections or pivots because I can stay where I am because it's either my fault, which creates a sense of guilt, and guilt is an emotion that really doesn't serve us. Guilt keeps us guilty, I like to say, right? It keeps us doing the same thing over and over. Oh, I feel bad about it. Well, let me keep doing it. And so guilt keeps us guilty, or it keeps me looking at someone else. And when I look at someone else, and that's that thing with anxiety too, I want to touch back on Kelly's comment. When my anxiety comes out through the lens of control, I'm easily within that bargaining space of grief and loss, right? If you listen to me, then I wouldn't be fussing at you. If you cleaned off the counter, then I wouldn't be doing this. I'm placing someone or something in the position of, or giving them the responsibility for my ability or inability to effectively regulate my emotions. And I don't want to do that because I want to take back ownership and control. The only thing that I truly can control is my emotional response, my thought process, my behavioral outcomes. And so when I'm bargaining, I'm giving that power away to someone else. I'm making them responsible for my anxiety, not to say that they don't have an influence on it, but when I'm operating through the lens of control, I'm telling them I'm responding this way because you did this. And what we really want to say is that I feel anxious when you do this, but I can still choose my response, right? It's two different things. I can feel this way, and this is where we use that lovely term that I love, that and yet still choose a different response, right? And so that's that part of bargaining piece. So if I replace that if then with that and yet. Depression is that should thinking, right? This should have happened. Oh gosh, I should be doing this. And one of the things that I saw someone post recently, is this pressure to, again, write a best-selling novel, to publish all these great songs. And if you are motivated during this time, more power to you. However, if this becomes a defense mechanism rather than a coping skill, then it becomes an area of concern, because if I am sprinting and my body needs a rest, if I'm in sprint mode and this is a marathon, if I'm in sprint mode and my body needs a rest and I'm refusing to give that to myself, then one of the things that's happening is that I'm setting myself up for a breakdown. And so when you're doing that, understanding that when I'm experiencing this, I can bring myself back into the present moment. So that should thinking keeps us stuck. And I want to come to your question. I see it. That should thinking keeps us stuck. And so it keeps me going back into memories. Oh, this should have happened. And oh, I didn't do this. And oh, I didn't do this. And I should be doing this. And I should be working here. And allowing ourselves to see that wherever I am is okay. And that's that permission part. Wherever I am is okay. Whatever it is I'm experiencing is okay. And however it is I'm choosing to move forward, if it's coming through that lens of flexibility, if it's coming through that lens of self-compassion and love, then that's okay as well. And then finally is acceptance. And so understanding with acceptance, it is, make it minimized so we can see. Understanding with that acceptance, what that means is I'm allowing myself to see myself differently outside of this role. And so what does that mean? So many of us have been programmed to see ourselves in our roles. And which is why it makes grief so hard, right? I see myself in the role of a student. I see myself in the role of this title that I have. I see myself in the role of relation. And because those relational aspects are gone, then I don't know how else to see myself. And so when we look at this, when we look at ourselves through this lens, I'm giving myself the opportunity to create a new reality. Because when we think about these types of conversations that we're having, one with ourselves and then with the people that we care about, for every ending, there's a new beginning. And Kelly, going back to your point, when we talk about that control piece, what I can do to open that platform up to allow everyone to have their experience is, how do we want to begin again, right? What are things that we can keep? What are things that we can start to create? And so I want to go to the questions real quick. So it says, what happens when the other part is so proud or narrow-minded that he or she doesn't listen to reasons when you're supposed to be right and express your point of view being respectful? That creates an exacerbated feeling of hatred on me and need to find revenge. And so I want to tie these two things in together with Sam's comment around tips around gaslighting. So I'll try to answer both of them. And so when you have a partner that you're talking to, or a person in your life that you're talking to, where gaslighting is a part of the relationship, or I don't want to listen to you, the first thing that I always say is, one, prepare for that, right? So one of the things that we know about pride, one of the things that we know about gaslighting is that both of those things are very predictable. Both of them are very predictable. I know who in my life is proud. I know who in my life gaslights. I know, meaning that they kind of pick and they want to kind of see a reaction from me. And so the thing that we want to do is not give the reaction. And so we plan accordingly. So this is how you become proactive. And so when we think about understanding what this means, that means that I am going to decide to not get in a debate with you. I'm going to decide that you are allowed to have your response. You are allowed to have your reaction. And so when we understand that, then that means that the way that I am approaching this conversation is going to be very, very clear on how I want to guide it for myself. And so Daniel, I see you asking the question about gaslighting. So it's a psychological term or an emotional term, meaning that I'm going to do things to have you question your own sanity. So an example is, I have done something to hurt your feelings, but I'm able to convince you in our conversation that you were wrong, so I get you to apologize to me. That's a common example of gaslighting. So it makes the person who's on the receiving end question their own reality, like, oh, well, maybe I was wrong when I said that, when the other person was clearly wrong. So I'm engaging in conversations with you, but it makes you question your own sanity. It makes you question your own credibility. And so when you do that, when I'm engaged with someone through that, then I plan effectively for this conversation, meaning, what is my intended outcome? If my intended outcome is to get you to agree with me, then I don't have the conversation. Because if I am talking to a person who uses gaslight as a defense mechanism or as a controlling mechanism, then that's not going to happen. And I'm going to set myself up for disappointment, resentment, like you were saying, the feeling of revenge, all of those things. And so I always start the conversation, or I suggest the conversation is always started through the lens of, what is my intended outcome? What is the purpose of this conversation? Is it just to be able to express myself? And if that's the case, then once I have expressed myself to where I feel like I've been effective at doing that, meaning you don't have to agree with me, I'm just saying what it is that I feel, then that's okay. Now, understanding that too, when pride comes into place, or we have other personality issues come into place, one of the things that I may not receive is empathy. And a lot of times when we have conversations with people, especially around conversations where we are allowing ourselves or permitting ourselves to be vulnerable, meaning I'm opening myself up to share that I feel anxious. I'm opening myself up to share that I feel scared. I'm opening myself up to share that I feel angry or irritable. what we want, and this is a natural human reaction, what I want you to do is to say something that provides a sense of comfort. That's why we have relationships, right? I know I can go to this person when I'm feeling this way. If that's not my reality, then one, I have to own that. I have to own that. And what I then can do is then I can then choose to decide, to consciously decide how I'm going to engage in conversation with you. And like Christina said, it's a whole nother show, but I want to say it because it often comes up in times like this. And Christina is, and I'll just pull her quote up here because to me is an expert in this just because of her work. But understanding that if I'm talking about feelings related to what's going on, to chaos or to sudden transition, and the person I'm talking to is not able to hear that, I want to own that I know that beforehand. A lot of times we try to throw out different approaches just to, I want to feel seen, I want to feel heard, I want to feel valued. And when I have a person who is guided by gaslighting, who's guided by pride, then one of the things that I always like to ask people, is it a can't or a won't? Is empathy something that they can't do, or is empathy something that they won't do, right? And those are two different things. And a lot of times when gaslighting occurs, it's oftentimes a mixture of a little bit of both, that can't or won't, because I don't know how, or I wasn't able to receive that myself. And so now I'm not able to, or I won't do it, or it makes me feel like I'm in control, and it gives me a sense of power, which brings me peace. And so we work to not set ourselves up for that, and we work to be proactive in the conversations. And so when gaslighting occurs, then part of our work is, oh, okay, I want to stop the conversation now and I'm going to go somewhere else. Hopefully that is safe. And so understanding where we are with that. And so hopefully that answered both of your questions. And so when we think about all of this, because I think that's a valid point when we talk about conversations, I need to know who I'm talking to, right? I need to know who I'm talking to, which is why it's so important for us to know, what is my desired outcome? And can I expect my desired outcome from this person, right? Can I expect this desired outcome from this person? And if I can't, then again, this goes into the parts I can control. Then how do I reframe this conversation for myself so that I still am able to have the desired outcome that I need to have, right? Or is this a conversation that I need to have too? Which means that how much detail am I able to give? How much detail am I able to disclose? How much detail am I able to provide? How much of my own sharing am I able to do that gives me the desired outcome that is realistic for the conversation I'm having, and also realistic for the relationship that I'm in? And so understanding all of that from a very clear perspective. Now, when we're talking about creating this plan for working through understanding and processing, when we're allowing this space to happen through this platform, I'm allowing this space to happen because I want people to process their feelings. I want us to create a plan that is effective for us, either as a family, as a friend, or however this relationship is defined. And I want to create the space for people to share their true feelings so that we can move forward effectively. And so as we talk about working through COVID-19 or whatever situation, whether it's chaos, whether it's change or whatever, that require these conversations, again, starting with these three core areas. One, I process first. I allow myself to process before any conversation starts as much as possible. We know that there are going to be events that cause us to just have an immediate response. We acknowledge that. But in those situations where I'm thinking, you know what, as soon as they walk in the kitchen, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this, I want to stop. And I want to acknowledge, what is it that I'm feeling in this moment? If I am feeling a place of anxiety, or feeling an emotion of anxiety, do I want to have this conversation right now? If the answer is yes, then even with that, then I need to own that, and I need to be able to ask for what it is that I need back from you. If I'm a parent, I'm processing this with my children, allowing them to process their emotions first rather than giving them their emotions. Sometimes I can model, like, it sounds like you're upset, but I don't want to say that for them. I want to be able to give them the space to share their emotions with me, understanding that people process in different ways, understanding that all types of process are allowed in this space or in this circle, Understanding that our goal is as much as possible to go more general, meaning that if I'm noticing that a certain thing is bringing up a lot of anxiety or tension around this event, I want to go more general around safety, right? Everyone is trying to maintain safety. So how do we work as a family? How do we work as friends? How do we work as partners? How do we work in whatever role we're in to maintain our safety? What are some things that we all can agree on? Again, my favorite question to ask people is, what does safety look like? What does safety feel like? That is huge, especially given this time. That may mean, for Lola, it means that we're starting and we're ending the day with a hug. That means that she's fallen asleep in my room and I'm taking her into her room. That means that's what safety looks like for her, and she's been able to say that. Or that may mean that for a younger child, if I'm a parent of a younger child, it may mean that I'm having tantrums because I don't know what it is I'm feeling. And one of the things too, adults have better tantrums than children too. So a lot of adults have been having tantrums too because they don't know what it is that we feel too. And so, like you said, Christina, too, I think it's important to not minimize how we each process. 100%. I have seen a lot of toxic positivity forced on others. Yes, that is very true, right? I either want you to be scared with me, or I want you to be overly positive with me, and shaming when you're not one of those things. And so, again, that's why it's so important that we allow ourselves to own our emotions too and own our process first. Again, am I sharing this information with you because I'm scared and I want you to be scared? Or it's because I'm on this emotional high and I want you to be on this emotional high, and how dare you not be on this emotional high? No, I can own where I'm at. And it doesn't have to be the same place as you. However, just because I'm not at the same place as you, and I want to go to Christina's point, does not mean that my values are any less. Again, that safety piece, right? It doesn't mean that my values are any less. It means that I'm having a different process. And that means that we can go about things differently, but we still have the same goals in mind. And so we look to find those areas where the power is shared, because we don't want to turn this into a power differential where we are getting into a back and forth or power struggle with someone that we really need to be joining together with and trying to find a common solution. The last part, or the last takeaway, is when we think about creating that plan. So when we talk about creating that plan, again, whether we are creating that plan for ourselves, whether we're creating that plan with others around conversations, leading with those I feel statements, right? I feel this when you this. And again, knowing who I can share that with or knowing who I can't, because that goes into that gaslighting piece. That goes into if I'm talking to someone who's, like you said, Christina, that forced toxic positivity, understand that they may not be receptive to that, and that is fine. I can still own what it is that I'm feeling. And if it's making me feel like I have to deal with that alone, how can I create my support around that? How can I create support where I do have an outlet to share, what it is that I'm feeling? Because I don't necessarily want to get into a debate with anyone about what it is that I'm experiencing. However, I still can own my feelings, because when we talk about this plan, we want to talk about or have conversations that allow for flexibility and the management of anxiety and feeling overwhelmed, feeling hopeful, that allow for the management of all of the emotions, right? I'm waking up tomorrow and I'm feeling hopeful. What is my plan for the days that I'm having a good day, or I'm feeling in a safer space? What is my plan when I'm waking up feeling depressed? What is my plan when I'm waking up in one of those stages of grief and loss, right? That is how we begin to take back some of the control over the conversations that we're having. That's how we allow ourselves to be proactive in this approach and control those things that we can control. And so that means that I'm going to own my emotions. I'm going to choose whenever possible to take the path of least resistance, especially in times of chaos. I'm not going to start with the hardest thing. I'm going to start with the easiest thing. I'm going to start with the easiest person to talk to that's in my life. I'm going to start with them first, not the hardest person. I'm going to start with the easiest person that brings me, that adds a little bit of calm and comfort to my day. And then I'm going to choose those thoughts that support the behaviors that I want to see. And so as we wind down for this evening, again, those 3 tips: allowing ourselves to process first, before we share out, allowing ourselves to use our feel statements, allowing ourselves to ask ourselves, what is our intended outcome of this conversation? Is it to comfort? Is it to inform? Is it to evoke fear? Sometimes we evoke fear, right? And that's very purposeful too, allowing ourselves to own that and share that out, and then allowing ourselves to create a plan that allows for flexibility, and management of all the emotions that come with this. And so I hope that tonight was helpful for you all. I love engaging with you all so much. I'm hopeful that, again, that this has been informative as it relates to breaking down conversations, using those I feel statements, being mindful of when we're getting into power struggles and allowing ourselves to take a step back, allowing ourselves to understand the details, what details are important to share, what details do I need to kind of hold out because it's just going to add to anxiety. We want to always have conversations that are based off of informing versus based off of provoking fear or guilt or shame, right? I want to inform you, so I'm giving you this information, and I want to give you the space to process as well. So I hope that this has been helpful to everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And on a Tuesday, you could be anywhere else in your house, but you are here with me, and I am so appreciative of that. So as always, let's continue to heal together. Have a wonderful evening. Peace.